School Committee to order. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Nobody else here to videotape? Okay, so we have a pretty full agenda for tonight, so we're going to start off with the consent agenda from our meeting on October 2nd. So,
I move that we approve the regular school committee meetings from October 2nd.
Donna?
Second.
Second, okay. Okay, any discussions, any corrections? So I believe it was just the three of us here, so all in favor?
Aye.
3-0. Oh, sorry, any abstentions?
Abstain.
2 abstentions.
I'm sorry, forgot to tell you.
She's not going to be here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, did you see
Yeah,
that?
she's
Okay,
gonna
all
take
right.
it.
She's gonna take the minutes remotely.
Okay. All right, so next up, we have our Chelmsford High School student representatives.
Hi everyone. So this week, mentors will be meeting with their mentees during Plus Block. On Thursday, we have an early release day, and sophomore guidance meetings will be taking place by house.
In addition, there will be a flu shot clinic at the high school on the 23rd. There will be a financial literacy fair on the 24th, and the Halloween dance for seniors is on October 27th. In addition, the next flex block for the high school students is on October 31st.
Okay, any other good news?
So good news, so at CHS, the fitness center is almost complete. Brand new furniture, flooring, paint, looks fabulous. We saw, we saw it today, it looks really, really nice. And also CHS just received a new digital manufacturing equipment, then it's gonna link the robotics class, the coding class, and the wood fabrication class together, so they're very excited about that. And this week, we have many educators that are going to the MassCUE conference, which is the Massachusetts Computer Using Educators Conference down at Gillette Stadium. We do, our math coordinator, Dr. Bayronavon, is actually a keynote speaker this time, and he also has started a weekly club for TED Talks, where students can start to write their own TED Talks, and he'll work with them to get them through that process. We also have, this week, we have 2,000 educators that are signing up for our area PD, which will be happening on November 6th. And they will have their high-quality PD in all of their content areas, as well as what's called an ed camp. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. We'll be running an ed camp for our other content teachers here in Chelmsford at the Parker Middle School, where they'll meet with other educators from other districts, and they'll be able to collaborate and come up with topics that are very relevant for themselves. So there's going to be a lot happening. Stay away from the high school and Parker Middle School on those days. There'll be no parking for anyone. We'll be in the golf cart, and people are super excited that we're able to offer that. We've expanded from 1,000 educators to 2,000 educators in less than 4 years. That's it.
Any other good news? I just wanted to mention, we did have our first public forum last Tuesday on school safety, and I thought we had a really good turnout. It was 50, 60 people, about 30 parents and other members of the community. We had people from the police department, the fire department, school department, probably 25 questions, and very good presentation. So I thought it was well worth the time. Yeah. So I thought it was good. Okay, public comment. There is none for tonight. Okay, so we'll move on to new business. So,
Thanks. First on the agenda this evening, we'd like to invite Kelly Rogers up. Kelly is our coordinator for English language learners, reading in Title I. So she's going to share her presentation this evening with us. As Kelly's getting set up, I do want to thank Kelly. Unrelated to this, as many of you have seen, even at the Safety Summit, Kelly has taken the lead on coordinating our ALICE group, or our options-based training group, which is really above and beyond her regular job, but has done a wonderful job, and I know it's been a big time commitment. So Kelly, personally, I want to thank you for doing that. And tonight you're going to be able to focus on your real job. So we're happy to hear your presentation.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. And yes, I am passionate about the ALICE safety protocol, so I'm happy to be part of that. Tonight, like Dr. Lang said, I'm going to be talking about the 3 departments or areas that I support, and that's English as a second language, the K through 12 reading department, and Title I. So I just wanted to begin by the way I laid the presentation out is we'll just talk a little bit about facts about each program, and then what's new, what's happening that you may not know about, and then some of our goals and initiatives. So currently, we have 184 ELL students currently enrolled in Chelmsford Public Schools. And I just wanted to make note that that is an 85% increase since 2010. We've gone from 99 students to 184 students, so it's been a big jump. We also have 130 FLEP students, and there are a lot of acronyms in the ESL world. So FLEP is formally limited English proficiency, and what that means is we have 130 students who received ESL support, but they have passed out of that. And by state law and regulation, we have to monitor those students for 4 years. So we have 130 FLEP students that we are monitoring for 4 years. If in fact we see that they're not making progress, then they can go back into our ESL program. Also, what's interesting is that we have 54 different languages spoken as our home language, and I find that very interesting, pulling that from X2. Spanish is the primary language that's spoken, and then the second language is Hindi, just as a few facts. And then what's new in the ESL program, we were fortunate to add an additional ESL teacher at the Parker Middle School this year. And so that was wonderful because now we have a designated teacher for each building. So we have 7 ESL teachers, where before our middle school teacher was actually split between the Parker and McCarthy, and then we had our Byam ESL teacher who was traveling to McCarthy to cover for the McCarthy teacher who needed to be at Parker. So we are so fortunate to have that this year. So we have a designated teacher in place at each school. So I'm happy to report that. Another thing that we implemented this year, at the beginning of last year and this year, is we secured an ESL academic tutor at Chelmsford High School. And the reason being is because we really felt the need at the high school level. The primary role of the English as a second language program is to really gain language acquisition. And what's happening is the students are going into the academic classrooms, and some of them are challenged by the content. And so we have hired an academic tutor with our Title III funds who supports our students academically. And so Christina Pagonis, she will go into the classroom with the students. She helps them with their homework. She helps them prepare for tests and projects. This has just been, I can't tell you the difference this has made. And then just as a little side note, Christina was with us at the end of last year. She came back to us this year, and the students were actually asking for her. She came to meet with me. The grant started October 1st, so she just came on board with us October 1st, and I walked her down to the classroom just to check in with the teacher and to see the students. And one of the students literally jumped out of his seat, and he went and he hugged her. So I don't know, such a good story because they really do appreciate her, and she's really made a connection with the students. So I was happy to see that. And then also we have an ESL Parent Advisory Council. This is something new. So there's new legislation with the state, and it's called the LOOK Act. And what that stands for is Language Opportunities for Our Kids. And so there are a myriad of regulations that we need to abide by. And one of these is to form an ESL Parent Advisory Council. And I'll be quite honest with you, I was a little panicked about this when I found out about it, because I wasn't sure how this was all going to look and who would fit that role. But it just happened that back in August, when I came to present to the school committee about Alice, there was a person standing outside the door having a conversation, and that person was Maria Santos. And the light bulb went off for me. And I said, oh my goodness, that's my person. I have got to recruit her because I think she would be such a great fit and an advocate for our ESL students. So Maria has agreed to take on the role. She will be the chair of the Parent Advisory Council. I've met with her. She also came to our ESL department meeting yesterday and met with the teachers. Her role is going to be to advocate for students and parents. And so the the advisory council is going to work very much like the CPAC. So we will have, she'll be the chair, we'll have members, we'll have bylaws, and there'll be meetings throughout the year. So yesterday we were brainstorming together with her about what the needs are for our parents and our students. So I'm really excited about this, and I think there are good things to come, and we're very fortunate to have Maria Santos on board with us in that particular role. And then also another regulation that is different, that has changed for us, is that we're now required to screen our pre-K students. So those are our 3 and 4-year-olds. So we last year purchased an online screener, pre-kindergarten screener, that we will be using this year to determine eligibility. So we're going to do that. We felt I talked to Russ Hoyt, the director of the younger students, the pre-K students, and we've decided that we're actually going to screen the students probably in December or so. We felt like they're so young at the beginning of the year. We have to have that submitted for our SIMS reporting in March. So that is the plan. We're actually going to do somewhat like a SWAT team, so to speak, that will have our current ESL teachers go over to the pre-K program and screen the students based on the home language surveys. And what's going to happen there is the state wants us to monitor those students and check in with their teachers if they feel as though they need support in that area. And then also, what's something very interesting is they have it's not a requirement, and this is one of the goals that I put for, actually my goal this year is to explore the state seal of biliteracy. And that's something that the state has put out. And basically this is students, high school students that are graduating that show high levels of proficiency in 2 languages. This is quite, an accomplishment, but they can get a state seal of biliteracy on their diploma, and this obviously would be advantageous for future employment and college admissions. So that's something that we will be exploring this year, and I can give you an update on that as that progresses. But like I said, the goals and initiatives for the ESL program this year is we need to implement our Look Act initiative, which, like I said, stands for Language Opportunities for Kids, in order to create opportunities for all students while closing achievement gaps. So we want to make sure that we have those parent connections in place and that we're able to support the students as best we can. We actually have a Title III or ELL Family Night coming up November 14th, and our ESL teachers will be there, and we're inviting all our families, and we have childcare available as well. There'll be a presentation and some activities for the families. So that is the English as Second Language program update. And I thought we could perhaps take questions after I review the other departments. So I'm going to slide into my next role, and that is the reading department, K through 12. Reading department and literacy K through 4. So I'll kind of explain what that means. But did you know that we have 2 reading specialists in each building, K through 8? So again, a lot of support in those areas. And there's 1 reading specialist at Chelmsford High School. So again, for some of those students who aren't quite up to speed yet in reading, who just need that extra support in comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, we have a reading specialist at the high school. So again, very well supported. We're also fortunate to have an elementary writing coach, Donna Murray, and she's able to support our teachers and our students. So she actually rotates throughout the 4 elementary schools on a rotating basis throughout the year, and she supports the students and the children with writing. So she was actually at the center school today, and I could not find her for the life of me because she was busy in the classroom. So what's new in the reading department, K through 12, K through 4 literacy? What we wanted to do is we kind of took a closer look at the programming at Chelmsford High School, the reading department and the programming and what was happening. And there was a real need for students to get more practice around, like I said, comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. And so there's a program called Language Live. This is a blended learning program. It's part online, part direct teaching, direct instruction by the teacher. And this program happens to be used by our special education department at the middle school. I think it was piloted last year. And so what we did is we kind of reallocated. Marion Smith is our reading specialist at the high school. And so she's now taking on 3 sections of the Language Live program, and again, working individually with students and in groups. And they're also, like I said, it's a blended learning model where they have that opportunity to do some online instruction as well as direct instruction. And again, that mostly focuses on comprehension, vocabulary, and also writing. At the elementary level this year, there was a summer curriculum writing group that got together. We had representation from all 4 elementary schools and representing K through 4. And the premise there and the idea was that we wanted to redesign the ECOS. And if you're wondering what ECOS is, another one of our great acronyms, it's the Essential Course of Study, AKA a pacing guide. And so the reason why we wanted to do that is because there's been a real push at the elementary level to make curriculum connections. And what does that mean? So how can we integrate our curriculum across subject areas? And so teachers came together for over 20 hours this summer, and they redesigned the ECOS or the pacing guides K through 4 for each subject area to include curriculum connections. So how can we, connect our science topics into our ELA and writing and mathematics? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are very fortunate. Again, the push has been to create these curriculum connections. And so last year, Donna Murray and I, we conduct data team meetings and writing meetings, and we meet with teachers at the elementary level, and we did a writing survey. And what are your needs? And out of that survey, and along with the data, it told us that teachers really wanted professional development around writing, and they also wanted resources that they could use around connecting the curriculum. And so Donna Murray and Ann Swisbin, who's the elementary math writing coach, they got together and they created what's called the Integrated Curriculum Unit. Melinda, do you mind just flipping to the next slide for a second? I'll show you. This is the binder. So elementary school teachers love binders, I have to be honest. Like, we can do this all online, but
Really,
it's,
who doesn't?
it's right?
Yeah.
I know.
So personalized.
It is. So anyway, what this is they worked the last half of last year, based on the data, based on the teachers' needs, to integrate the curriculum. So they took the new science unit that was taught at each grade level. So for example, this is grade 1, they're teaching sound and light. And so they came up with resources that teachers can use. Do you want to flip it to the next one? Do you mind?
Yeah, I need a
Resources
beep or something.
resources that teachers can use, and they, while they're teaching their science unit or after they teach their science unit. This includes text-based reading, articles that students can refer to, all the genres of writing. So, for example, if a teacher wants to pull a narrative writing project out that has to do with sound and vibration, which is the science topic, they can do that. Or informative and opinion writing. Donna also included a poetry and art section throughout all the grade levels, grades 1 through 4. And the reason for that is because the data told us last year that in MCAS, our poetry scores, the students didn't score well. So let's take it down to the first grade, start there, and then progressively, give them experiences and exposure. And hopefully by the time they get in grade 4, they're just gonna nail it, of course. But she also included content-specific vocabulary for these students to be working on during their science units. And again, how perfect is that for our ESL students? You can put that visual, make a word wall or whatnot. The templates and the time that went into this is unbelievable. What's also included is Anne included a math activity that goes along, a math extension that goes along with every science topic and investigation as well. And how this was rolled out was we've been going to the schools and meeting with all the grade levels and kind of introducing this to them and walking them through it. It has so far gotten rave reviews, again, because of the binder, I think. And it's in color, too. It's like, it's really good.
Personalize it.
But again, the whole idea is just how can we give these, how can we provide these experiences for students and make it meaningful in context of what they're learning. So we just don't want to take it, out of anywhere. We want it to be related to what the students are learning. We don't just want to randomly give a writing assignment. We want to make sure that it's connecting to all of our curriculum. And with the new social studies, social science standards that just got passed this year, we're also, working towards that as well. So I just wanted to give you a little update on the integrated curriculum units. And then Linda, do you mind just going back 2 slides?
2 slides.
2 slides back. Perfect. And then like I mentioned, in the data writing across the board, our MCAS data is telling us, and I have to be honest, across the state, the writing scores have slipped a little bit with MCAS 2.0. The expectations are different. So Chelmsford was definitely scoring much higher in that area before MCAS 2.0 in grades 3 through 8. So we've seen a little slide. And so we're saying, okay, so what do we need to do? Let's provide some supports for teachers and students. So Donna Murray, and around the idea of idea development and inferencing actually was the biggest challenge for us in Chelmsford across the grade levels. And so Donna Murray and I are actually going to all of the staff meetings during the month of October and November at the elementary schools. And Donna's introducing the whole idea of idea development and how you can teach that and what does it even mean. And then with that, she's launching or proposing different scenarios where teachers can participate in some coursework or get professional development points with her. So she's running a book group, she's doing a writing study, and so teachers can sign up for a myriad of professional development opportunities around writing throughout the year. So that is one action item that we are putting into place, again, because teachers are asking for the professional development and we see a need for it as well with our data. Another thing that's new across reading, and you may have heard about the implementation of iReady, that's not only a diagnostic tool, but that's also an intervention tool. And that's what's a little bit different about iReady that we've seen, where a lot of these programs, so to speak, are diagnostics. So we get the data, and I'll be honest with you, we do a lot of diagnosing, so to speak. We have a lot of data, but what we really were intrigued about with the iReady product is that it provides an intervention for students based on what they need. And so the students take the diagnostic, it says where they're at, and then based on that information, they'll have specific interventions that are catered to them. The iReady tool and resources are unbelievable. I have to be honest that we're just exploring the potential and the possibilities of what they have to offer. But it's the hope that students will be using, again, I view iReady as a blended learning model as well. It provides online instruction, but it also allows the teacher to provide direct instruction based on what the data is telling them from the iReady results, and the resources are provided as well. So that's happening K through 8. I can speak to it mostly K through 4, but a little K through 8 as well. And so students are using this tool this year, and I think it's worked well. We're providing professional development around this for teachers. We had a professional development back in September. We'll have another one on, I believe, October 29th. So that's happening with our reading department. The goals of the reading department, like I said, integrating that curriculum across subject areas. That's really a goal with all of the curriculum with us, right? Would you say? And then also implementing tiered instructional practices based on what students need, based on that data-informed decision-making. So what is the data telling us that students need, and then providing those interventions specifically for the students' needs. And I think, like I said, iReady is able to do that for us. So that's a little synopsis of reading. And next, I'm going to move to Title I. So Title I programming here in Chelmsford, we are a targeted assisted district, not a school-wide district program. And by that I mean that district-wide, it's a federally funded program. In order to be a state district-wide program, you have to have a 40% or higher poverty rate. Here in Chelmsford, we have 19.5%. And so we are a targeted assisted program. And what that means is that we take a look at our grade spans and we cater to that. And so we target our K through 4 grade span. And that's where we're putting our support. And so again, Title I, federally funded program. We get funding each year for that. It's supported by ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And the goal there is to make sure that we're supplementing what students are learning, not supplanting. So this is an additional dose. We're giving students something extra to kind of bump them up to meeting benchmark in grade level. And what's new this year for Title I, we actually have 9 Title I reading and math combined Title I reading and math interventionists K through 4. We have 3 qualifying schools. So we have Byam, Harrington, and Center. And South Road does not qualify for Title I funding this year because they were above that 19.5% threshold. And that's, again, how that operates. We also, with this, included in the grant a parent advocacy leader, which, again, we feel like is really important, is how can we involve those parents in their child's education and how can they support them. We also have a Title I night coming up in November. And again, we'll be providing activities, and the Title I interventionists will be there. We'll provide daycare so parents can bring their children. And it's quite a nice night. And then at the end of the year, we provide a summer reading kickoff program in collaboration with the Chelmsford Public Library. So those are some of the highlights for the parent advocacy leader role. And again, Title I, providing Tier 2 support to students to meet grade level benchmarks using hands-on approaches. So for example, we use math expressions for our math program here in Chelmsford. And what are we going to do a little bit differently for our Title I students? So we actually invested in not really a program, but some hands-on manipulatives. And Ann Swisbin, the math coach, works with the math interventionist. She provides training. I believe they had one last week. And how to implement and use some of these hands-on manipulatives so students can just gain that foundational knowledge and understanding of mathematics. And so that's happening. And again, family engagement, which is really key. And how do we strengthen that and make sure that those connections are happening between the family, community, and school? Okay, so that being said, does anyone have any questions about ESL, Title I, or reading?
How do you keep it all straight?
How
do you keep it all straight? You got so many different hats to wear. That and the Alice stuff.
I'm never bored.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful thing,
I can imagine you wouldn't be.
I have one question.
Sure.
With regards to the ESL Parent Advisory Council, is that similar to our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, where they're an advisory group to the school committee about education and safety programming for special ed students?
So I'll be honest with you, I'm actually going to an ESL meeting, a state meeting on Thursday, but there aren't a lot of guidelines around this advisory council yet.
Okay.
But good thing to know is we do have Maria Santos on board, who's very familiar with CPAC. She's familiar with the Council of Schools. When I met with her, just saw her yesterday, I know her plan is to come to school committee at some point. I'll join her as well, just to talk about that. But I will find out more information. There is limited information online about the Parent Advisory Council through the state because it's something that is very new. But more details to come.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I was just going to add, like CPAC were required by regulation to support. This is just getting up off the ground. I don't know of any specific regulations, but that's what Kelly will follow up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think we're envisioning it being a similar group.
Okay.
I think the fact that Maria's an immigration attorney, this could not be better. I'm
Couldn't
so
be
happy that
better.
she stepped up.
Right?
This is just awesome in this time that
Unbelievable.
we're facing such uncertainty with these families.
Absolutely.
Even attending a meeting like that could be,
Very scary.
yeah, very scary.
daunting.
And to have someone there who deals with this every day, it's
Absolutely.
just awesome.
And she's so comforting too.
She is,
so.
she's terrific.
definitely a win for us. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank
Oh,
you very
thank
much
you
for
very
coming.
Enjoy your evening.
Appreciate it.
If you could just update us with the scores periodically.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, next we have an update on the capital plan.
Yes, since we last got together, I think it was the meeting before last, the first iteration of the capital plan had really taken into consideration all of the Doran Whittier study. So Brian Curley from the school department, myself, Gary Persichetti, and Kathleen Canavan from the town had sat down and gone through the Doran Whittier study, had kind of ranked ordered all of the various projects that we're recommending for attention, and had, again, a few school committee meetings back, had presented that to you. That's kind of the black data on the form. And then 2 meetings ago, we had taken the existing town capital plan that had some projects that still weren't completed on it, and we incorporated those into the plan, and those were coded as red. So if you had it on, if you're looking at it online as opposed to the print copy, those were red. The last component of the plan was to incorporate the technology recommendations with regard to the enhancements to the security and surveillance systems in the schools. So Bill Silver and his group had been working with some technology vendors to walk the buildings and come up with some assessments and some recommendations for technology enhancements. So you'll see in this last iteration of the report, I've included those, and those are color-coded in blue, just so that it would stand aside a little bit for you. So at this point in time, you have what I feel is a pretty complete roadmap for us to look at over the next 10 years. It is broken down into 3 different phases. So high priority phases are years 1 to 3, medium priority years 4 to 6, and then lower priority. I want to stress, these aren't low priority items, but just in the scheme of phasing, they're on our lower priority list, and those should be tackled in years 7 to 10. So like before you, and so you have all those various pages. So before you this evening, what we had talked about was trying to get some consensus and to make sure that you are kind of online with our recommendation for these different projects, particularly the first year projects, the FY20 projects. And if you are, what we would then end up doing is preparing the different project sheets for the capital planning committee to review. We'll usually get notified that we'll have a hearing sometime at the end of November or early December with them. But usually by the end of October is when we're required to turn those into the town so they can be added in with all the other town projects, and then it will move to hearing. If you agree on those particular projects this evening, and again, for example, the high priority year 1, which are the FY20 projects, the dollar figure on those is 1.7 million. If you agreed with those particular projects, we'll behind the scenes start working on all the recommendations for the group, submit them, and then what we can do at the November meeting, or the 2 meetings in November, is actually go through that $1.7 million list and prioritize them based on what your feedback would be. The town typically funds about $2 million or so in capital. Sometimes it's going a little bit higher, about $2 million in capital each year. This is going to be a follow-up conversation we're going to have with both the town, and I think it's really a timely discussion to have with the tri-board when we get together sometime in December with FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. Because even on the school side, we tried to kind of keep it relatively even, but we're looking at the next, 1 to 6 years of about, $1 million, at least $1.5 million to $2 million worth of projects a year that we could really just use in the schools, never mind what the town needs for the various town departments. So there might need to be some kind of parallel funding stream or some kind of parallel focus to potentially fund some of these projects. So I think it is important for the school committee, if you say agree this evening to the 1.7, at least it lets us start to prepare the sheets for those. But we should spend the time actually talking through each of those projects over the next 2 meetings and prioritizing those, because when we go to town meeting, if we don't have the ability to fund them all, we need to know what order we're recommending them be funded in. So that was the kind of the rationale of the way that I would recommend approaching this. Happy to talk about any specific projects this evening, any of the thought process that went into this. I know you've now seen this a couple of times, so you've kind of got a gist of it. But that's how I would recommend approaching this. But I'm open for your comments and concerns and questions.
Any questions?
On the first page, it's a small money item, but install VFD for RTU.
18.
We're using a lot of
Oh,
initials.
I couldn't guess.
Yeah, VFD is some kind of variable frequency drive on RTU is a rooftop heating unit.
Okay.
Now, some of these are pretty granular when you look at the actual project themselves, but some of them actually kind of get coupled together with others. There were a couple of like really smaller items that related to the cafeteria, replacing some of the butcher block, like the wood, with stainless steel. So some of the numbers might individually not hit the threshold, but we know we have to go through, say, all of the kitchens that were cited with that deficiency. So I'll lump that into like one project on the cut sheet that goes to the capital committee, because we would want to do, say, all of the replacement of the butcher block to the stainless steel at the same time. But a lot of this, if it's in black, that's how it was listed on the Dawn Whittier report. So I didn't want to go fooling around with it too much in case we ever had to crosswalk back to that report to see what the rationale was. Which one, Al, were you looking at particularly?
You already, Chelmsford High School on the first page, that was the only thing I had a question. The VFD with the,
Yeah, variable frequency drive on rooftop unit 18, I believe is over the, one of the gymnasiums.
One of the line items, they have security at the police station. How does that fit into?
Yeah, so there's two of those. They're not huge numbers. They're both about $12,000. So if we, right now, again, to step back for that for a second. So at the high school, we have a significant number of cameras inside and outside the building, 100-plus type range. At our elementary and middle schools, we have exterior cameras on the buildings, and then we also have interior cameras just in the lobby. But we didn't really have the network capacity to have additional cameras throughout the building. So now with the network upgrades that were performed this past summer through the fall, we have a capacity within the system to add additional cameras. If we were to add that, there are some enhancements that we would want to make at the dispatch center at the police department so that they could, better be able to pull up cameras and to be able to access some of the new cameras, as well as at central office. So if there were ever an emergency in a school, we'd want to be, they have a particular kind of screen setup you can go to that you can automatically kind of call up the cameras that are having the issues that need to be looked at. So it's about $12,000 per setup. But in an emergency situation, well worth being able to really hone in and see what's happening at those two locations. So again, that was actually included in year one on the security enhancements, because you wouldn't want to install this new technology but then not have the police or central office be in the loop with the cameras. The other thought process behind this was we do have a significant number of cameras, again, already at the high school inside and out. We just did the upgrade to the Parker network last summer. We just did the McCarthy network upgrade this summer. We'd like to add interior cameras at those two schools. That's why those two schools were prioritized in year one for the camera installs. So in year one, you saw cameras going in at those two locations, plus central office and the police department. We're not adding security cameras at the police, I want to be clear, we're not adding security cameras themselves at the police department or central office. It's a reading screen. It would be like a specialty screen that would integrate with the software just so that we can view the cameras. And then in year two, going back to the high school to be able to refine some of the cameras there, add cameras where it was identified in the walkthrough that they were necessary. And then in year three of the plan, it was to install cameras at the 4 elementary schools. So to kind of do them as a program all at the same time. Again, the total security enhancement over the 3 years is about $1.5 million if you add up all those individual projects. Would we love to do it all at the same time and get it done? Certainly. I think living within the economies that we are, I think breaking it up this way still gets it done and categorized as a high priority project. And if we tackle it over the 3 years, I think we'd be in good shape by the end of that point. But that was the reason that the police department
Yeah, that's what-
and central office was listed.
Okay. Other questions?
Just going back to the safety questions, safety items on this. So just to be clear, you want to spread these out over the 3 years, and why not do them all in year one and bump some of these other items down to 2 and 3?
That can certainly be a discussion that we have when we're prioritizing projects. If we were to move, the $1.5 million for the security into year one, and we're only dealing with, say, $2 million in total, then the only thing we might be able to accomplish is either the security cameras or even just a piece of the security cameras. Because again, I don't know how this is all gonna fall in the total scheme of other competing town projects. But we did have several other projects that were coded, again, particularly with cafeterias, where we had some health code violations with the, again, the changing out of the butcher block, adding some different wash sinks in kitchens. That would mean that those items have to kind of get bumped to year 2. And in our thought process, we're kind of trying to do a little bit of everything. We're also, when I look at these different projects, we're trying not to put all of our resources into one building in any particular year, but to kind of spread the project so that every school is seeing a little bit of something. And we're not just focusing all at, one particular school. I do think that there should be a conversation that's probably warranted with regard to, say, a big item like security. Is that something that should actually be a standalone project? And I think that's something that we could talk with, certainly the town manager, the Board of Selectmen, FinCom with. Is that something that we might want to do, again, as a standalone project, all at the same time? Would that even warrant going to like some kind of special warrant article or something? Because of the concern and the amount of emphasis we're putting on school safety.
Right.
Would we want to do that at the same time? We can certainly have that talk. I think for the time being, we have all the figures that back it up. And our thought process was to kind of keep it a high priority, but sprinkle it over the 3 years.
Other questions on this?
No, I'd just comment that I think it's very responsible to include a lot of the things on here that aren't very exciting, because it's easy to bump those, and if you bump them several times, then you get behind in regular maintenance. So it kind of relates to, we started to head in that direction, somehow we have to keep up with all these things that let me put it this way, aren't as exciting.
Like sneeze guards.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a health safety thing.
It is.
You know,
I
it's not-
remember when it
it's-
was a huge
It's
issue.
not exciting, but it is something that,
It's the reason we couldn't have salad bars. And it's a huge issue.
but a lot of times when you have these competing projects, again, some of those less
I know.
exciting projects end up getting bumped. Like I'm losing my mind tonight, the dividing walls at the high school,
Oh,
the
yeah.
classrooms. That was something that was bumped year after year after year on the plan. It was about a $150,000 project. But just every year there was something a little bit more important to do, so it kept getting bumped. But I'll tell you, since we put them in, I think it was 14 to 15 classrooms that had that removed. The kids love it, the teachers love it. You're not hearing that, kind of dialogue back and forth between the two classrooms. So at some point in time, you just have to kind of, even though it's not the most exciting, you got to get it done to be able to get on to something else. But I think this really, it's a very good conversation to have, but when we're doing that prioritization, we can do that. And like, if you do talk about technology, like I can pull that out so that you just see like the total project value.
Right, so what do we need to approve this entire plan tonight, or do we?
No, I mean, I guess, I also look at this as a working document. So even though we're gonna approve technically a 10-year capital plan at the end of this, something could come up, a month from now or a year from now, and we're gonna have to come back and keep this and reprioritize. So this is kind of a living document. I think tonight will be helpful for me is if you, at least, approve me preparing with our staff the submission of the projects that are listed in year 1, the FY20 projects, to be submitted to the Town Capital Committee. We will then come back, and I think that's fine for tonight. It's still a living, working document. We'll then come back over the next 2 meetings in November and actually talk about the prioritization of those items, so that when we go to capital in December, if we want to make any switches at that point in time, or we want to rank order things, we can. I think that's all I need tonight, if you feel comfortable with that. And then again, this will just be a working document that we tweak as we go.
Okay, that's right. I move that we approve the top priority items for capital expenditures so that the administration can prepare as necessary.
Second.
I think
For year 1?
for fiscal '20.
So if we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? No, she did. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you very much.
So put that in future meetings to do the prioritization.
Yeah, we'll probably do it over the 2 meetings.
Okay.
We can do those in the 2 in November.
And can we include in that, just a discussion about maybe to pull out of the the safety piece?
Yep.
To have a discussion with the,
Well, the other thing I think that would be, we'll certainly do that, but I think the other thing that would probably be helpful is to have a meeting with Bill Silva from technology, you know, maybe even his counterpart that he's been working on within public safety. We could have an executive session to really talk about the scope and the intent behind some of these security measures, because again, it would be a conversation you wouldn't want to have in public. So we could have that conversation to just kind of get on the same page about what's actually being recommended. We can do that certainly before the next meeting or between the two. But I'll pull all the technology stuff out for you.
okay, because I think, I don't want to lose sight of that being a priority for us in
Oh,
this
it's not,
district.
yeah.
Okay.
Right. But I'm just saying we could dive deeper into like what some of those projects actually would be.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, next item is, I had provided you with some draft goals at the last school committee meeting to, again, they kind of align with your goals to be the focus of our work for the year. I think on the, obviously, the first goal relates to academics, the second, social emotional learning. Third was, again, continued alignment of our finances and facility resources that match up with the strategic plan. But on the last page, I really tried to list some of the professional practice goals and some of the 4 main areas that I think I'd like to work on this year. The first being, and again, it kind of aligns with one of your goals, around really taking a look at a comprehensive communication strategy for the district. Second, with, again, continued refinement of the budget planning and presentation process. Third, our work on our capital improvement, capital planning. And then last, just having my professional development for the year be aligned with those 2 big initiatives. Our technology initiative, and then also the school safety initiative. So these we provided at the last meeting. Again, we tried to crosswalk them and line them up with your goals. But we'd held off so you could have a chance to review them. And then if you agree, this will be the basis of my work for the year.
Any questions, suggestions in regards to superintendent's goals? I mean, I do like that they do kind of go along with, the
They're
2 sets of
aligned.
goals kind of go along well together, which is, you know,
Right.
we're all kind of working towards the same end.
I think they hit on a lot of just the bigger projects that we've been talking about.
Right.
And it is nice that your goals and my goals would be aligned, because that'll be the focus of a lot of the reporting and discussions that we have over the course of the year.
And like during the course of the year, you'll report back to us on progress towards these.
Yep, I mean, at various points throughout the course of the year, you know, I'll be providing you reports on kind of where we're at with these different projects. Obviously, you know, when we get to, like, say, the budget planning, you know, I'm gonna give you a document that lays out, you know, the budget process, how we're gonna go about that. I'll flag some of the new nuances of the budget, or if there's new areas we're gonna focus on. So you'll get that ongoing throughout the course of the year.
Everybody comfortable with these?
Well, just one thing, earlier it was mentioned that there are new social studies standards. I don't know, we probably should, it may not be here, but we probably should have something about looking at those somewhere.
You
Yes,
have to kind
definitely.
of tear this piece through. Like, when we started with the new standards for ELA and mathematics, they took the focus.
Yep.
Now we have to put the focus on the next generation science
Science.
standards. Then we can then put some focus on that. So to try to do them concurrently
Yeah.
is a little muddled, especially for your elementary school teachers who have to teach all 4 subjects.
I understand.
So it's not that they're being ignored or not the #1 focus on there, but we have to finish this boss piece in
Yeah.
the next generation science standards.
We could just start with the department.
They are, and a
Okay.
lot of the work
Right.
that
And
Stephanie
even
Quinn is
though,
doing
like-
is departmentally.
Yeah,
So they're being
That's
put in,
fine.
and you'll see, Kelly also talked about how we're integrating that in, like, to our nonfiction units at the elementary level.
okay, good, sounds good.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the superintendent's goals.
I move that we approve the superintendent's goals for 2018, 2019.
Second.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
So now that we've done that, we've approved our goals and the superintendent's goals, I think in one of the next couple of meetings, we have to have a discussion about how we're gonna go about evaluating ourselves.
Yep.
Okay.
Are we gonna what?
How we're going to evaluate, what are we gonna use as a evaluation tools, or what we'll be seeking in terms of evidence in order to be able to evaluate ourselves and the superintendent next year, next year.
Right.
Next year.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it could be a part of a larger conversation, just an evaluation in general for other administrators and. Okay. All right, so next up is the MCAS.
Very excited. So, before I start this, I just want to make note on there are many questions still out there for schools about this new accountability system. It is a little cumbersome to go through. What I'm going to try to do is break it up for you and get you through some of the major pieces and the talking points. And we'll be doing a lot of the digging deep work at the school level and with the teachers. You heard Kelly talk about data team meetings. Teachers already have this information, and they're already starting to work with that. I do have to toggle between, though, the legacy MCAS for science at the middle school level and then also at the high school level. Last year was the last year for those students to take the previous MCAS that we've all known about. Our current sophomores will be taking the next generation science standards, next generation MCAS. And also last year, our 3rd and 6th graders did not take it online. They will all be taking it online, as well as our high school students. So there's some little differences and nuances that are going on. So I'll take it slowly. Don't let my PowerPoint scare you. There's more transition slides than really what's in there, and a lot of information. So I'm going to walk you through, obviously, the overview, what it looks like at the school level for the administrators, and then next steps and questions. So the two things you have to remember is that there's 2 main indicators, right? One of them is going to be criterion reference, and the other one's going to be normative reference. I'll break it down first with criteria reference, and then we can go into the normative reference when we get there. So what you have to remember is the criterion reference is what the state has for indicators to help us decide how we're doing as a district. The normative indicators are how we're doing up against other like districts. So you remember the DART districts that we had? That's one of the questions that are out there. Do we still have DART districts, or are we just now doing these like districts? And that's still, one of the pieces of the puzzle we're trying to put together. The best way to kind of think of the normative indicators is when you take your kids to the doctors, you want to know what percentile they are. They're in this percentile for height and weight, 50 being average. And then when you think of criterion reference, you have to think of 75 and better. 75 being like the A, the meeting the expectations. Anything above that is good, okay? So these are the different indicators that they come up with that they will then compare us to and see how we're doing as a district. The high school has additional indicators that the K through 8 schools levels would not have. So let's start with this piece. So what the purpose of the criterion reference is how we are doing in Chelmsford, not compared to other people, how are we doing, and how can we close that achievement gap for our students. So what they did is they broke it up, and this is actually one of the nicer things that I think that they did with this new accountability system, is that they gave us the information about our aggregate, which was all students, and then they broke it down into the lowest 25% of the performance for those students. And why I believe it's good and why it's important is sometimes you can look at the numbers that you have and say, oh, wow, great, we're up, really high, we're doing great, and move on. But there is this percentage of students that are nobody's moving them forward. So it allows us to take a step back and say, well, what's happening with those students? What is the lowest performance for them? And then how can we move them forward? So we did like the fact that they did break it up into the 2 groups, and we can actually identify who those students are. And again, this would only be for your grades 3 through 8 students that you would have this information. High school is different. So for 3 through 8, they weighted these different pieces. Now you have to remember at our elementary level, they have to have 20 or more of a group for it to count. So there are really no L pieces for the elementary level, so they would be in that first lane without L's, right? Without L's and then with L's. And these are the different pieces that they're looking at for us. They're saying, how did you do in your achievement? Did your students grow? And then do you have your students that are identified as L's, are they moving forward and gaining the language? And then one of the biggest indicators that they picked up this year was chronic absenteeism. I can tell you that's not a problem in Chelmsford, but it is one of our criteria that we have to address and make sure that students are showing up. So what they're saying now is that students cannot miss more than 10% of their school year, which is 18 days for a student. And there are some students that could be up there, and that was one of the questions that came up. If students leave to go visit their home country, they're still registered, but we're marking them absent. We wouldn't go and put a whole initiative together on chronic absenteeism for a handful of students, but it could affect a school that only has a certain amount of students in that particular level. So, yeah, so that, I think for the cities, it's very appropriate, and they'll give you some guidelines on how to, come up with action plans around that, but that is not a Chelmsford Public Schools worry, I can tell you that right out of the gate. So then, for the high school, they have the additional indicators on there, so they still have the achievement for math, ELA, but science as well. And then they have the SGP, which is the student growth as well. And then high school has additional indicators, including making sure there's a graduation rate, extended engagement rate, and that's for students that are going beyond 4 years at our high school. Are they staying in high school? Annual dropout rate. And then they have the language proficiency as well, so we usually have that piece for them. And then chronic absenteeism, which would make sense at the high school level, but again, it's not a Chelmsford issue. And then one of the new indicators they put in there is advanced coursework completion, so that could be your AP classes and your dual enrollment classes. So we tend to fare very well on that in Chelmsford as a whole, because we offer a variety of AP, and now we have the dual enrollment piece, so that would fall under advanced coursework completion. They want to make sure we're really kind of getting to that higher end as well as trying to close the gap. So when it comes to the scoring, what they'll do is they gave us targets this year, and that is one of the questions that are out there. It's my understanding that because these were supposed to be new scores, you couldn't compare it to previous years. However, the state came up with targets for each district, and it's my understanding in talking to DESE that they looked at more of the historical data on how our district was faring, and then they made those targets. So it's new. Our targets aren't huge because we were always performing high, but that is where they came up with those targets, is looking historically how this district did. So once they gave you that target, they decided if you exceeded it, you got 4 points. If you were meeting it, you got 3, 2, 1, and so on. So that's how they came up with that piece for criterion reference.
This replaces the levels?
This replaces the levels, so there's no more levels. The school district as a whole, Chelmsford Public Schools, does not have a level. The schools have their different levels, but their levels are now exceeding the standard, meeting the standard, partially meeting, not meeting. So those are the new levels, but they're not 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5s. High school still has a level only because it's their last year going through this process. So what you would like to do is you want to be meeting the target for your students. You want to make 75% progress towards meeting that target, which is like I said, the A. And then anything above that would be up to 100. So you're still on a 1 to 100 scale. So this is the different criterion scoring. So this is what I was talking about. So 75 is meeting that target. I didn't put, exceeding, because we now know that obviously anything over 75 is exceeding, partially meeting, and then focused target group and broad comprehensive support. The district as a whole is partially meeting targets. We're, close to meeting those targets. Each school has their individual targets that they've gone through, but they don't want you to put them into levels, but a lot of the districts in general are in the partially meeting the target category it's even in the Merrimack Valley. So I'm gonna give you an example. This is actually the Byam School Criterion Reference Accountability. So they took those two groups, all students, and then they took the lowest performing 25% students, and what they do is they average those together and they come up with how you're doing with your targets. So as you can see, Byam Elementary School did very well for their achievement, their growth. They don't have Ls, like I talked about. They do have Ls, but they don't have 20 or more, so they won't report that number. And then absenteeism, the weight is at 10%, so they have a 3 for all students, but the lowest performing students is a 4, and that could be, many students do leave our schools to go and visit. It doesn't take too many students to make that change, but again, we wouldn't move forward with a whole initiative on chronic absenteeism, because typically it's because students are either sick or they're out visiting their home country. They then average those pieces to get those together, and then they come up with the meeting the targets. So what they're trying to say in this percentage is that the Byam Elementary School is 79% towards meeting their targets for proficiency. So that's how that criterion reference comes through. So then the normative reference, like I talked about, is think of percentiles. You want to be at 50 or for the average, and then anything above that, you're obviously exceeding, and then below that, you're not exceeding. So I think of it as when you brought your kids to the school, to the doctors, they're in the 99th percentile. They're really tall. So it's 1 through 99. They line them up. It's 1 year worth of data, right? There's no more. They're going to be adding more data as we go through this. And then what they're doing is they're comparing us to schools like us that ended up giving the MCAS. So like for our for our elementary school, like schools that administered the grade 3 and 4 MCAS. That's what they're comparing us to. And then they use the other accountability data to then determine the ranking for our schools. So again, this is an example of Byam Elementary School. Their accountability percentile is 86. So we would be saying Byam Elementary School performed better than 85% of the other schools in the state who also took the test in grades 3 and 4.
Current data?
This is current data. So I used Byam as our example.
Good choice.
So they're saying that they, performed 85% better than other schools that were administering this test in grade 3 and 4. So those are the two main components of this. Now this, I know it's kind of hard to see this, but this is the overall data, and this is on the DESE website right now. All of our data is available for the public to look at. And what it gives you all the point systems and then how each school is doing. And that's what I put for you at the end of the PowerPoint. I won't go through each school specifically, but it gives you an idea of where our schools are performing in general. Now, this is just one layer of data. I'm going to show you the different criterion underneath each one of them. And then even tonight, you won't see it. There's a deeper dive into the data. We look at grade levels, we look at specific students, we look at specific subgroups. So if you think of this as like, this is kind of like the topic sentence. Here's the overview of what's happening. And then underneath each one of these, you'll take a look at how the school is doing in general for each one of those indicators that we talked about. But then there's this additional layer that you won't see tonight where it drills right down to the grade levels and the students, and we can take a look at how those students are doing. So each school, like I said, had an achievement level. So this is an example, again, of one of the schools. This is Byam. I think I kept with Byam. Yes, I did. I kept it pure with Byam to let you know that how our students are doing in general. So those targets that I spoke about, if you look in the fourth column, for all students, they were saying that those students need to at least meet a 507.1 in order to meet the target. As you can see, they exceeded the target. Same with our lowest performing students, and then you can break it down into each one of the subgroups. If you see the dash, that means we just don't have enough students to report in that subgroup. And that's one of the first layers that we look at. Okay, what's happening for our academics? Great. Our achievement, it seems to be high at the school. Then we would move into the growth. And growth is nothing new for us. We know that everybody has to be at 50, and we've obviously met that target for the Byam at this point for the SGP. The difference this year is that they're going with the mean. They used to go with the median. We're now looking at the mean for SGP. So Byam has met this for all students, lowest performing students, and high need students. And then students with disabilities, we don't have enough to report for grade 3 and grade 4, so this is probably grade 3 that I pulled. So we'd have to drill down into that deeper dive that I spoke about and find those students to be able to get that information. And then when chronic absenteeism, so as you can see, this is what we had a target of where we needed to be. There's some ups and downs here. We'd have to see what it is, but if you notice, the change is not so drastic that we would go out and say we have to really come up with an action plan around chronic absenteeism for our students. We would be looking at those specific students and working with those families rather than the school as a whole. And then now when it comes to assessment participation, this is important. You can't be pulling kids for not letting them take the test. This is how the state makes sure that you're not pulling your outliers and not testing them. So we're at obviously 100% for our students, and this is, again, one specific school. And then this is where it gets a little convoluted because the science test and it's still the same science test that they took in the original testing. They haven't moved over to any of the meeting and exceeding. They're still with the advanced proficient needs improvement. So CHS, McCarthy, and Parker have a science achievement indicator with the old CPI that we had in the legacy MCAS. So that gets factored in to our achievement levels for our students. And then for high school, what I was talking about before is they have, everything is still the legacy MCAS. So it's the old CPI, but they still have the growth factor. And this is where we would take a look at what's happening with our students. And they did pull out the lowest performing students for us, so we can at least take a look on how those students are doing. So again, you see the ups and downs. The declines are not such big swings, but we would then look at those individual students for those groups. And then the high school obviously has a 4-year graduation rate. We're exceeding the target. We missed 1.2 students. I don't know what a .2 student looks like, but there seems to be some factor in there that you'd see that one subgroup has a decline, but our students tend to have a 4-year graduation rate. And then the extended engagement rate, this is beyond 4 years. If somebody has a 5th year, looking at all of our students, we're pretty much meeting those targets. Students stay in school. And then they have the dropout rate, and again, Chelmsford High School has a very high tolerance of not having a dropout rate. We work very hard to make sure that there's programming for students, whether it's, a night school online program. We work with those families extensively to keep kids in school because we know it's important for them to graduate and have options. So the last slides that you'll see, I know again, they're a little small, you can see them on the DESE website, was just to kind of give you a flavor of how the schools are doing. So if you were to look at the McCarthy Middle School, they have their target. They've made 51% progress towards meeting that target. And we'll see what that target is for the next year. In terms of accountability percentile, they outperformed by 70% other schools that administered the MCAS, obviously in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you'll see the same for the Parker Middle School. Same thing. What's important, at least for me, is to look at the 2 middle schools to make sure they're somewhat equitable in terms of their percentiles and obviously their criterion reference piece, because you don't want one school completely outperforming the other. And then in terms of our elementary schools, Byam's the outlier. Byam performed very, very well this year. They went through a lot of, different pieces, but they did very well. And then to make sure that our elementary schools are somewhat equitable, which there seems to be, a little discrepancy in the accountability percentile, but around the criterion reference, you'll see that they're, somewhat the same. And last but not least is South Row. So there are a lot of different questions that are still out there for us as a group. We just make sure that we have programming for them. You heard Kelly tonight. She spoke a little bit about some of the programming that's happening, which is the next steps for us. Obviously, we have to have those data team meetings. It's not helpful to collect data and then not talk to the teachers about that data and make those decisions around that. And then what's important for us is obviously identifying those lowest performing students, because we need to pull them for interventions. This will help us with our elementary interventionists using iReady. And then in the next couple of years, we're going to be correlating that iReady data with the standards up against the MCAS to see if everything is in alignment. And then common planning time is necessary, and we need to really pull in our special educators. That is a subgroup that we do need to focus on here in Chelmsford to make sure that those students have an equitable education and that they're also receiving the interventions necessary to close the gap. And then we're creating lessons around the strands and the domains. You heard Kelly talking about those integrated units that helps the teachers teach their literacy block, but also meet those science standards at the same time. And then we're obviously doing focused writing strategies for science. I'm talking to John Morris, our science coordinator. Instead of students just giving like a one-word answer, we're doing writing across the curriculum. So they're going to obviously offer some type of statement. They're going to have the evidence behind that and then the explanation underneath to understand really what the concept is in science instead of just taking a quick test. And then obviously the DESE will be coming out with more guidance documents as we go. I have a nice big stack here that if anybody wants to read that tonight, they can do that. Bob Curtin, who is kind of the behind-the-scenes guru of this from DESE, has already come out to talk to the superintendent's group. He's actually coming this Friday to our Merrimack Valley group for the assistant superintendents who work in the curriculum department to really talk about what is happening with this next MCAS piece and what we should expect and how we can improve and move forward. So I told you it looked a little scarier than it, when it was. There's a lot of transitions just for me. So I'm open to questions. Hopefully I can answer them.
I think I have questions.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There.
It's a lot. I think it's important to go over it, though, because students now have their reports. They've all been mailed home, so all students, all parents have their reports.
The parent reports as
Yep.
involved as this?
Yep.
So they have to-
No, I have actually, I can pass around an example. The parent report actually looks really nice. I think it's easier to read than a lot of the things that you receive, so I'll pass around an example of it. And what they'll do is they give you an example of how your students, if they were to take this test multiple times, how would they perform? And you get that little bar that's in there. And then it also gives them information on what standards and where they need some support, so parents can support them at home. So I'll pass, this is just a blank one. This is a parent report. You can take a look at, that information that goes out there for that. So I find that was the least of the convoluted part. This is more difficult.
Does that come from Desi or?
Yeah, that came from Desi, and I was going, we just received them today, so I printed them out so I could take a look, because I don't receive these anymore, and we were gonna post them on the website.
Yeah,
And
I
there's also a guidance document for parents. The National PTO is usually pretty good about putting out guidance documents too, so I was going to check and see if they've come out with some more information for parents, because it's a lot to understand. And, obviously we say to most families, talk to your classroom teacher, talk to your schools. Certainly they can give me a call. We can help them through this process, as we're all doing it together.
Donna, you have something?
Right.
Can't figure out what the question is.
No, I mean, I think that, I think this is great. Okay, I think that this is gonna give us much better information than we've ever been able to get before from this. So with regards to the, I wanna use the proper terminology here. It's not underperforming students.
Lowest performing 25%.
That does not include the alternate MCAS.
No, so the MCAS alt is for students, it's a portfolio that students put together if they are in a program where they have severe special needs. They work with the teacher and they put together a portfolio. So the lowest performing does not have that in there, but all students has that in there. Another thing to note too is for the district, where we don't have the percentile, but for that district piece, they did put in all of our students' scores, this is where we're a little confused, that are in out of district placement. That's a little difficult for us because the students aren't in front of us to help support them. So, and I don't understand how the number correlates then with the schools, if they put in a whole cohort of students that we don't physically have in our schools. So that was one of the questions that we have for this Friday of, how do you explain this, right? A lot of people keep saying, well, great, I get it, but then how do I explain that? Because to me, the numbers are not the same.
Right.
I'm not on a level playing field.
So what kind of data will we get from the alt assessments that will help us determine what kind of instruction we need to
Have you
provide?
seen one of the alts before? Do you
Yes.
do, so the data that comes from the alts is by standard, and then what you would do, and this is what we do for any of our data, is what do we really need these kids to be able to focus on, whether it's for a 6-week period, 2-month period, maybe it's a full year period, depending on the student. It will help you identify where you really want to, get involved with those students and what interventions you'd like to do.
So that's not changing.
That's not changing. The
Okay.
alts have not changed.
All right. And then for the extended engagement rate,
Mhm.
you said that's the fifth-year students, but is
That's-
that not necessarily the students who are staying till they're 22?
It could be. That's why, because we don't have, the 5th year could be somebody who just needs an additional year of high school. Again, we're not talking about a large amount in Chelmsford.
Right.
And then it's also for students that are beyond the 5th year, and that would be our students that are here till they're 21,
Okay.
22.
What do you think of the new system? I mean, comparatively, you're the one that's in the trenches with it.
I think some of the stuff that's difficult is great. I'm glad that they compared us to other school districts, wonderful, but at the end of the day, I really can only focus on the school district, right? And work collectively. I do think that it's hard with that criterion reference because of some of the indicators like chronic absenteeism, that it could fluctuate quickly. I'm looking at the achievement and the growth. Are students achieving, and then are they moving forward, no matter what level that they're at? I do like the underperforming piece, because I think I probably have been remiss in times, even as a classroom teacher. I'm like, great, they all did pretty well. And you look at that middle of the road piece and you're not doing the upper and the lower and stretching those kids. I do like that they put in the advanced coursework because I think a lot of effort goes into trying to remediate students. Kids that are just doing well are just continuing to do well, and then we forget about this higher end, because you don't want kids to be disenchanted with school because they are good at school. So that was an important piece to help us, make sure that we keep that programming in place. Because a lot of school districts are getting rid of the AP because they're not giving the money at the schools anymore, so it's easy to dismiss it. But it's not necessarily about money, it's about opportunity for students. And then the dual enrollment is great too, because that gives those kids that necessarily weren't going to take an AP class, take the AP test with College Board, but they're still going to get some type of extension in there. So I'm confused about the targets still, because again, it's historical data, but they told us we couldn't compare it. And that was weird for a lot of us. But at the end of the day, it's like anything else. I think of this as our governing board, right? This is one piece of a larger puzzle, but somebody has to be looking at what we're doing as a district. And I like our internal benchmarks because that gives us an idea of what to do on a day-to-day basis, month-to-month, unit to unit. But I do want to see that somebody's watching to make sure that what we think we're doing is, we're doing well, that they do this, and somebody's looking at what we're doing. The other part about accountability, people have to remember, it's not like an I gotcha kind of thing. The state would then target money towards us. This is how we get our Title I, Title IIA, Title III. You heard Kelly talk about our special ed money, and they help us with that in terms of targeting certain specific issues that could be happening within our district. So when people think of accountability, they get nervous. They're like, oh my God, we did something wrong. It's really not supposed to be about doing something wrong. It's about getting support if you need support as a district.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Maybe, I don't know if you, so will the MCAS portion of the DART information be taken out now of that report?
That's one of the questions for Friday, because it didn't make sense that they did the percentile, but then we're gonna get those as DART districts as well. We're not sure how they're doing that.
Okay.
I was wondering if you had, as a presentation, anything that would focus on the AP classes. I'd love to hear about them, what we offer, how the students perform. I think that would be a terrific presentation.
We can do that.
Thanks.
We need a director of guidance to do that. That's all right, no, we can do that. Now I also can pull together that data for you, so you can see how we fared in SAT,
I'd like to see it over
AP.
time.
Yep.
What the addition of maybe 1 or 2 employees have done.
Yep.
You know.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions?
Let's go back to the DART
Go
thing for a
ahead.
second. Okay, sorry. One of the things that I've always really admired about Chelmsford is when you look at our per pupil expenditure, and then you look at our test scores, we were doing a phenomenal job. I mean, really, serious bang for the buck, okay? And so I understand that they don't want to necessarily compare towns anymore and things, but still, nonetheless, we know that people are going to do this, right? And, I'm not really sure what my question is. I guess it's like, let's be realistic. It's going to happen, so I'm not sure that,
They'll be able to not be
I
able
don't
to
know
do
if
it.
they're necessarily not going to, we just don't know exactly what it's going to
Right.
Thank
look
you.
like yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what it's going, I'm not saying it's going away, we just don't know what it looks like. I mean,
Okay,
when it comes to
all
the
right.
DART, remember, they're doing it based on similar schools that have the same amount of students that you do, L population, poverty,
Right.
right? They want to put you on a level playing field, and then of those schools that are like you, how did you do? And we do very well.
We do.
What they did with the percentile is they looked at the whole state, anybody that administered just grade 3 and 4
Right.
for MCAS, and they compared it to everybody, right?
Right.
No, whether you have 200 students in your school or 2 million students in your school, that's how they came up with that accountability piece.
Okay.
So, for the percentiles, so it is difficult because I don't know what all the other area districts are doing. I know Merrimack Valley, I know our DART districts, but will we compare to somebody out in Western Mass? I'm not gonna be able to talk to them. I might be able to talk to somebody in the DART district. So I can get that answer for you and report back.
It's more, I think, that what concerns me is I think sometimes, people make these comparisons. We see certain things come out in magazines, you know, the.
Oh, it
the-
depends on what they
Right,
pull.
you know what I'm saying?
Right, the
Right,
niche
exactly, you know,
report, the
exactly,
Boston,
all of these
Boston
things.
Magazine.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm talking about, and people, you know, are, you know, anxious to see how we compare against other districts. So, I always like the DART information because it gave us a realistic, you know, comparison against, you know, schools that were similar demographics and similar issues and things like that, so, I don't know, I apologize, the
Can't
question's
imagine
not
that
really
going away.
formulating in my head, but
Yeah,
I think you
can't
get what I'm
imagine that
going at.
away. I
But
just don't think
yeah.
we know exactly what it's gonna look like.
Okay.
And I don't know if they
even
know.
they know.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
That's
all I
maybe
could
that's why I
think
can't
of.
find the question.
This is all
Yeah.
kind of rolling out
Yeah.
as they go.
And then when they rolled it out too, it was, okay, it's going public, you have 4 days to look at it. Well, like, what? You know, like,
Right.
what does that even mean? So, I mean, honestly, I will tell you, they do a nice job. It's a pretty extensive document. I can't wait for you all to read it. But when you do read this, and you can see all my scribbles, that's how it made sense to me. I took this and put it into this and try to make it digestible for people. It is, and it's still not. I know, I
Right,
get it. You
right.
might have a little, you know, agita going on. But this, if you read these documents that they put out, they're actually quite good. And they're very responsive on the phone. And we just have to decide what we're doing. But we're already sailing the ship. Like, it's happening. Our students are here. We're educating them. And I want to make sure that we have at least internal benchmarks with something like an iReady. iReady does follow the standards, our writing prompts, our F&P scores for reading levels, right?
I'm
so-
really curious, I think you are too, just to see how that's actually gonna correlate once we have a year or two of the iReady data
Right,
Yeah.
to the test. That'll be huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that will help us, because at least that's something we can do right now, instead of waiting for it to be, it's like a summative assessment. Did I pass this class? Did I not pass this class? We can
Right.
stop midway and say, okay, I need to pull these groups of students, and then they also have a platform to actually help them. They don't have to go develop a whole new lesson.
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, I apologize. I can't, as I said, quite formulate the question because I don't really have enough information yet, but I think you understand where I was going with this, so.
Yeah, and I agree with you, I know what you're saying. It's easier to understand DART because everything's the same, level playing field. If it's everybody, the whole state, that's, you know, a lot of
I
districts.
wonder if that's almost gonna be, and I don't know, but if that's almost gonna be like the state average that they used to report out in DART.
Could
And
be.
then they're still trying to figure out how they're going to select our DART districts. I don't know. I mean, this is something that we're watching for too.
Right.
But it's new to us, it's new to the state. I don't know that they fully know.
Yeah, and I think what's important to know is that there's different reports you just want to watch those subgroups.
Right.
And you also want to watch the disparity between gender, right? And making sure that everybody has those. So those are the things like I'll look at
Right.
overall, just to say, do we have an issue at any one of the schools? And then drill it down, and, you know, the teachers know their kids best. So when we give them their reports, unless they're a third grade teacher, because it's the first time they're taking it, they're getting how their students did that are gone, they've gone to another grade level, and then who's sitting in front of them, you know, in the seats, and how they can pull those together. So the reports that we have access to, that the public doesn't have access to, are great, to be honest with you. They're color-coded, they make very clear what's going on, and we pick the top 5 to help us make those decisions. I mean, you could do reports all night long on the Edwin. And then they also have the early warning system that's coming out. And so what I did is I pulled those kids, and I looked at them already, and I'm like, okay, yeah, these are the same kids. So their early warning system is actually doing pretty well, too. They've been really putting a lot of effort into that.
That's
Because
great.
you want to not say, oh, everybody's doing okay overall. What about these ones down here, these little peanuts down here?
That's great.
Great.
Any other questions? Anybody's? Well, thank you for
Yeah,
putting
no
all that
problem.
together.
Yeah, it's a lot, but we'll work it together as we go along.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so next in your packet are the resolutions for the MASC convention. There's 9 of them. So I don't know if we want to go through them and take a look at them and decide if we would support them, not support them, not take any action on them. So,
Yeah, we'll just go through the list.
yeah, you want to just go through the list? Sure.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if we have a debate, we can debate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the larger print sheets are a little easier to follow than the smaller.
Yeah.
You know, those
Some of
us
these
with
are pretty strict.
little eyes, yeah. So we go through the rationale and to even put in the opposing side to some of these. So the first resolution is rejecting the arming of educators.
Do you want a motion? How do you want to do this?
You want to take a motion on each one individually? They're all different?
Yeah.
Okay, so, obviously you can see the MASC is against the arming of teachers. So, I don't know if anybody has an opposite view of that. Okay, or,
Do
so.
you want a motion on the
Yeah,
floor?
yeah.
I move that we accept resolution number 1.
I second that.
Any discussion? Donna, you
No,
You don't wanna bring
I've got
that?
no discussion on this.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, resolution 2 on small and rural districts. So MASC is calling for creation of a working group to advise the legislature on the best public policy solutions to support small and rural school districts.
I move that we accept resolution number 2.
Second that.
Questions, any debate? All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 3, elimination of the Federal Department of Education. So the federal government is proposing merging the Department of
really is.
Education with other departments. MASC is against that.
I move to accept resolution number 3.
Second.
Any questions, any opposition? All in favor? Aye.
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 Fourth one's on regional school transportation. So to promote greater competition for bus service contracts, the legislature should eliminate Mass General Law 71-7C and authorize a deeper analysis of the lack of bidders on school transportation contracts. Any
Want to do the
questions?
motion, then the question?
Yeah, why don't we,
I move to accept resolution 4.
Second.
okay.
Is this talking about regional districts, or is it not like a district like Chelmsford? Yeah, probably.
I think it's for regional schools.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't necessarily apply to us. I'm just trying to,
I would think that some of the evidence that they compile would apply to us at some point. I love the idea of the lack of bidders of school contracts, and we have the same situation here.
We
Not
do.
just regional
I
schools.
agree.
Right, every
local
school
schools
district.
have,
I agree with Barbara
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I think this is gonna,
Not
lead
that
to
I don't know if we can do
better
anything about it.
I
mean,
know.
there are only so many bus companies.
But the legislature can provide some, incentives for people to start, there could be a small business in the regional areas, but, I think that this is gonna be a serious issue.
I think one of the things to acknowledge, too, is this is a lot like the school building thing. Sometimes resolutions become more important over time and get passed after the second or third time that they're
Right.
proposed. So
I know what this one is now. There is obviously must be this law, I just didn't know it was this particular number, that prohibits, say like the LRTA, the Lowell Regional Transit Authority, they are technically not supposed to do, and I guess they technically don't, fixed routes for transportation. So they're not supposed to do like regular bus stops and things like that outside of their regular routing for their schools. If, say in Lowell, if kids want to take the bus, they just have to go to one of the prescribed LRTA stops and they can take the bus to school. But it's not really contracted services. I bet there are some school systems that have LRTA-type groups near them that would like to utilize those services. And maybe, right now, the LRTA or any regional transportation authority is prohibited from working with the school system on this. So this must remove that barrier to allow them to potentially bid on or be a partner in those runs. I don't see any harm in,
I think it's a great idea.
yeah, I don't see any harm in doing so.
All right, any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye. I move that we accept resolution number 5.
Okay, so
Second.
regarding reporting and accountability standards, so this is requiring schools,
Schools that receive any public funding
right,
should
so
be such a
charter
same
schools, that type of stuff have to still,
Yeah,
Yep.
government regulation.
yeah,
Yep.
have to,
level playing
held
field.
accountable to the same standards and requirements of common
Exactly.
statutes.
Sure.
All right, we have a motion, a second, any questions, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 6 regarding reproductive health education.
I move that we accept resolution number 6.
I second that.
So this one is calling upon this again has to do with the federal government, does it? Massachusetts School Association reports evidence-based reproductive health curricula whether we call upon the U.S. Department of Education executive branch to stop the support of abstinence-only education.
It's just providing more information to students, and I would hope that we are beyond this as a society, that abstinence-only education is the only answer.
So this is coming
Hear,
from the rumblings from the federal, right? Nothing.
Right. This is-
Nothing local. I
Right.
think this
Yeah,
is federal.
Yeah,
I think so,
it
too.
is.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion already?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any questions to debate? All right, all in favor?
I move that we accept Resolution 7.
On gender identity inclusive athletic participation policies.
Second.
So this would file legislation which have effect of protecting LGBTQ students from discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Schools should treat students based on their gender identity, protect their privacy, provide access to general neutral restrooms, locker rooms, private stall showers, using their preferred pronouns, embedding sensitivity training and professional development, and providing uniform accommodations. Any thoughts?
Well, it is very challenging, but, there's got to be an answer, and I think anything that can look into these issues is great.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. The application of this may present some problems.
Right, right.
In terms of locker rooms and so.
Right,
Locker
right.
rooms and sporting team and participation,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, the general idea, to prohibit the discrimination, harassment, bullying, all that stuff is obviously is
Right.
good. Okay. All right, any other thoughts? Donna, you look contemplative?
No, actually, I think that, I mean, we're already, this is already an issue, and this is just going to force, us to take a harder look and do what we should be doing anyway, really. And, I think it's, actually, I like that it actually provides some direction.
And you see more and more places when you're going are gender-neutral bathrooms. And I think, we might be able to identify areas where that would help us, especially in the sports. Maybe there's times, that this time is for LGBTQ students. I don't know.
Again, these are.
This is, other parts of the country, we have a former student who's in California, and he has to change clothes in his car.
Yeah.
And California's way ahead of
Yeah.
where we are in
Yeah.
general on this. So this is going to be a major discussion, I think.
Yeah. And we're talking, this is proposed at the state level. We have our own local, our own district policies regarding this too.
Right.
So they're already in place, so. All right, all in favor?
Aye. I move to approve Resolution number 8.
Resolution number 8, relative to sports wagering. So Mass Association of School Committees requests that should the general court enact legislation to legalize wagering on sporting events, the general court shall commit a portion of the revenues generated from sports wagering to public education.
This was the intention of the lottery, I remember, and we got away from that. So maybe we could be a little more direct on this.
It was a lottery, just
Does this
general
mean we're going to
local-
have betting
The
on high schools?
lottery
No,
was
no,
intended to
no,
fund
no.
education when it was established.
No, actually, when I first read that, I went, oh, wow, but no, it's not betting on high schools. It's not betting on
No.
high schools.
No,
No.
it's just sports wagering in
Yes.
general. So,
Yeah.
have a sports book and all that.
We'll get there.
Hopefully not.
No, I know, but
No, it would just commit funds.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye. Last one.
I move we approve Resolution number 9.
Okay, so relative to access to information for parents and students who are clients of special education. MASC urges the legislature to amend state law to require that parents and students be provided a copy via email or mail of all assessments that are performed for students in the family's preferred language at least 5 days prior to any meeting in which parents and students will review a proposed IEP.
It's currently 2.
2 days?
2.
2 days.
Mhm.
That's fair.
I think so.
Oh, really, is that, so right now
Right now, it's 2.
All right, any questions, debates? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're supporting all of them.
That was awesome.
Yeah, unanimous. I didn't have to take notes.
Yeah, that's good.
Next item this evening is our first quarter financial report. And I'll actually turn this over to Joanna, if you don't mind, to walk us through.
We have a few reports for the local budget, the grants and revolving funds, and the student activity accounts for the first quarter of fiscal 19, which is July through September 30th. the student activity accounts are just through August because we wanted to balance to the bank statements. And the bank statements are a little in, they come like now in October, so didn't want to wait to publish the set. Wanted to highlight about 5 areas in the local budget that are favorable, and then just a couple that are a little unfavorable at this time. Overall, the labor and non-labor accounts are on target at this point in the fiscal year, and I don't see any reason to recommend any changes or shifts or to the committee at this time.
Thank you.
So on page 3, one of the favorable variances is in the curriculum directors, and that's primarily because we still have the vacancy of the guidance, that lead in those interviews. If you recall, we reposted the job description, and those interviews
These
are
are
going
2 positions, correct?
It's just one.
For one.
One position.
The
For
director
one.
of guides have made it a new title.
Director of Social Emotional Learning and
Okay.
School Counseling. We just gave him a couple of departments.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah,
My
it's
mind
still-
was
One
thinking.
person,
Are we
lots of
still
Yeah,
departments.
I was just reversing it. No.
Yeah, we, hopefully we'll have an announcement for you by the next meeting.
Okay.
But we did actually have a round of good interviews last Thursday, and we had some follow-up interviews today. So we'll hopefully, and as soon as we know, we will let you know. But we actually had some very good interviews.
Next, on pages 5 through 7 are the classroom teachers. And overall, that category is favorable by the $367,000. One of the areas that will remain favorable all year will be the lane change account. You had approved that budget transfer last time, and that budget transfer was approved in October. So the September report does not reflect that budget transfer. I don't backdate the transfers. So on the report, it shows $126,000 as if there were no lane changes. But once that's done, that account is still going to be favorable by the $66,366. And then all the other accounts, there's favorable and unfavorable variances, and you heard this variance explanation last year as well. We budget vacancies at a master step 3. If someone comes in at a bachelor's step 1, we'd have a favorable variance. And conversely, if someone comes in, it's more likely a transfer at higher than a master step 3, then that particular account will be unfavorable by the difference, let's say if they're at master step 11. So overall, when you look at the entire category, we're still favorable. There are no vacancies. There are no teacher vacancies at this point. And then if you, the next section, page 7, the specialist teachers, that's special education, reading, ELL, those are the specialist teachers. Overall, that category is showing unfavorable at $25,776, but as you may recall, the budget has an offset to the CHIPS revolving fund for a portion of the CHIPS teachers. So that journal entry will be made in the 4th quarter. And then once that's made, the category will be slightly unfavorable. And again, that has to do with, again, the same reason, hiring in higher or lower than master step 3 in the transfers.
Will be favorable or unfavorable? It says favorable here.
Well, 115. Oh, and actually we do have, I'm sorry, there are some lane changes in this category too, so once those dollars come in, we will be slightly favorable. You're right. Thank you. And then if you Most of the rest of the accounts are favorable, not all the non-labor. We still haven't encumbered everything, not expecting any issues there. If you go to page 17, that's the school security, and right now, that's unfavorable by 33,300. And as you maybe remember when we talked about the transportation revolving fund, and then having the offset for, remember we talked about the parking passes, and then a acceptable offset is school security, and that'll be, we will make that journal entry in the fourth quarter for the 33,000, and then this category will be right on budget. And then page 19, special ed tuitions. This is the chart you're familiar with. We budget special ed tuition in 3 different areas: the local budget, the circuit breaker account, and school choice. All the activity is in this one account right now, and we do the journal entries in the fourth quarter, and once we know where everything's going to come in at. John, you had asked me a couple meetings ago when we had done some budget transfers out of the special ed tuition account. To just summarize those, there were 3.
Okay.
And that totaled 81,000. So that's reflected in the chart.
See it.
But overall, we expect special ed tuitions to be $7.5 million.
Okay.
And we expect an offset to circuit breaker for $2.8 million. School choice for $250,000, and the Valley credit, we had budgeted just $200,912, but we know that credit is going to be $549,502, and the superintendent presented at the last meeting that difference, and that's a surplus. Another surplus I wanted to point out is, and I think we mentioned this at a prior meeting, the circuit breaker we thought would be $2.8 million, but it's going to come in at $3 million. I think I have it down in the notes. Here.
$3,093,000.
Yes, $3,093,000. So that's another surplus. So that will mean, the school committee will then need to decide where to reallocate, listen to the superintendent's recommendations, and we'll take your input, where to reallocate our resources because of these 2 surpluses.
What's the max we can carry in the circuit breaker?
1 year's worth.
1 year's worth.
So like last year's allocation is, well, this year's allocation is $3,093,000.
Yeah.
So we could carry over $3,093,000.
Okay.
And then the school choice fund is the second box. We have 1.3 million. We started the year. We've received some revenue for the first 3 months. We're at 1.4 million. And then with our forecast for the year, and then the offset to special ed, the estimated year-end balance would be the 1.365842, and then that's the piece where we've talked about doing a one-on-one initiative and funding that through school choice.
Thank you for adding the budget transfers in.
Oh, yep. Any questions on the local budget?
I think I'm in good shape.
And
Pretty
then the next chart is the grants and the revolving funds. The 1 page. The top portion is the 2018 grants that are still open. They're multi-year grants, so we're gonna still spend a little bit on Title III, Special Ed, and Title I. The next section is all of the 2019 grants. Those were just all approved, and the spend is getting underway, encumbrances. The next section is other grant fund, such as ATEF, E-rate, Lockheed Martin. The circuit breaker balance is also in this section. We started the year at 998,984, and then thus far, this is just one payment. It was actually last year's fourth quarter payment came in July, so it was recorded in fiscal 19, and then fiscal 19's first quarter payment came October 2nd, so it didn't book yet for September. And then the lower section are the revolving funds. So school nutrition, athletics, transportation. And all of those are in the black. Any questions on the grants or revolving funds? And the last section, which is new, well, you saw a piece of the high school on this when we did the student activity audit in the draft. So this is, as of August, there's one for the high school with all the clubs and sports. And then the next one is the McCarthy Middle School by all their clubs. And then the last one is the Parker Middle School and all their clubs.
Were you able to find any additional audits done on the activity report prior to the 2014?
I reached out to the auditor. They did find one from 2009.
Can I look at that?
They haven't forwarded to me yet.
Okay,
And as soon as
awesome.
we get it, we'll post it on the website.
Thank you, thank you.
Anybody have any questions on?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for including the information.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
That's great.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. Next item on the agenda is a memorandum of agreement for you to review and approve. About a year or so ago, we created a coordinator of school nursing services position, if you recall, in the district. And originally, that was set out to be a non-affiliated position. The Chelmsford Administrators Association provided us notice that they would like this position to be included within their bargaining unit. So this position has a similar job scope to other coordinators who are in the bargaining unit. And I actually asked Andy to help prepare an MOU similar to what we did for the elementary assistant principals. If you recall, when we created those positions through the budget process, we did a similar MOU. So basically, it recognizes a position within the unit. The next time we go to contract negotiations with them, we'll incorporate it by title reference in their actual recognition clause of the contract. And this will be on the same grid as all of our other coordinators within the district. So happy to answer any questions you may have, but would recommend your review and approval of this evening.
Are there any conflicts with the nurses? Does this person perform any nursing assignments?
No, so right now, this person would oversee the nurses in the
Yeah,
schools.
no, I understand what the position is, but in the past, that person may have had assignments at schools, so there would be a conflict with their enrollment in the nursing contract.
Right, so this wouldn't go in the nursing contract, this would go in the administrator's contract.
No, that's,
I might not be understanding
yeah,
you, I'm sorry.
I'm questioning the work. Does this person act within the other bargaining unit as well?
No, currently, I mean, like a sub, like if a nurse happened to be out sick and they couldn't find a sub, she might fill in for a day. But no, she doesn't have any regular nursing duties as part of like a regular job.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Al, so this would actually be a motion authorizing the chair to execute this MOU with the agreement, with the union.
I move that we authorize our chair to implement the memorandum of agreement between the Chelmsford School Administrators Association and Chelmsford School Committee relating to coordinator of school nursing.
Second motion.
Right, any questions? This doesn't change or what she's being paid or anything like that at this point, is everything just a change?
It's all ballpark. There's no substantial money changes. We're gonna have to put her on the grid where the other coordinators are. But when we were doing our budgeting, we always kind of knew that this was gonna go that way, so I budgeted accordingly.
Okay.
So no, that wouldn't be a big issue. She is not affiliated, but she's basically been following the same work year as our other coordinators.
Which is 12
Year-round-
months.
It's a year-round position.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We just do a roll call?
It would be a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
Great, thank you. Next report this evening is just your personnel report for the month of September. Again, this report comes to us from the Personnel Office, and it just details the new hires to the district, a couple of resignations, we didn't have any retirements, and then one of our staff in the district transferred from one position to another. So that's just noted on the second page, third page, I'm sorry. So just for information purposes, passing that along to you.
Question about the ABA position at South Row. Was that person assigned to the new behavioral classroom?
Which one?
The ABA position, paraprofessional at South Row Elementary. Is that part of the new classroom for behavioral?
I do not know off the top of my head, because
Okay.
I don't know the
right.
four names. We did, through the budget process, add 4 positions, 2 for each classroom, and they would be ABA positions. I just don't know if that, do you happen to know, Joanna?
I can look. while
Okay,
we're talking.
we can
Thank
look.
you.
I just don't know if it happens to be that person or not.
Yeah, I just don't want to be down in that program.
Oh, no, I can tell you that there are 4 people in
Okay.
that particular program. I just don't know if this happens to be one for that particular program
Yeah.
or not. But we'll try to look up as we're going.
Thank you.
Any other questions, personnel? Go ahead.
Last, just a quick update. We had taken some notes of different requests committee members had asked for previously. Ms. Newcomb had asked for just an update. If you recall, I think it was the July meeting. Cheryl Kirkpatrick, the Director of Personnel, had come forward and talked about some of the things she was working on, and one of them was an online or kind of an electronic staff handbook. So when you have approved that the staff handbook has been posted to the Chelmsford website. It is password protected, so you do have to be an employee of the district to be able to access it, but I did provide the link so that you could see that it was there. And then she details how she's actually going to be rolling this out to staff as the year goes. So I think we're in a little bit of a situation where new staff coming to the district, and you'd asked for some feedback. She really hasn't received much.
Okay.
And I think we're in the position where new staff coming from to the district didn't know any different as far as if we had an electronic or a paper handbook in the past or no handbook. And new staff in the district, until you really have a need to go look at something, probably have not had to utilize the document itself. So one of the strategies that Cheryl was going to employ to kind of make staff aware of this is when different questions get asked of the personnel office, if someone's looking for a form or a policy or something like that, in the response that she or the staff may send out to the employee, she's going to provide the link to the appropriate spot on the website to just direct people to. Or if someone's asking for a form, you can find the form here, and kind of start pushing some traffic that way so that people see it as a resource.
Okay.
And then I know she is also going to be going to work with the secretaries in the different school offices when she interacts with them to just find out if there are common things that staff ask for, because again, this is kind of a living document as well. It's our first crack at it. Are there different things that people ask for that we can just incorporate proactively into the document for future iterations when it comes back to you?
So
But-
does HR currently have access to all forms that employees would want to access on the website?
I'm not following you.
If an employee wants a form that they
Right.
would have to fill out for HR, are they currently available on the website?
It should be in the handbook, right?
What I'm saying is instead of having it be a standalone form, she's trying to link people to the form which is attached to the handbook.
So they can download the form?
Oh, yeah, you can download the
Okay.
form, but it's just where it's actually found within the handbook. Most of them are like hyperlinks out of the handbook. Yeah. So it's a work in progress. When we have different departments come in throughout the course of the year, if Cheryl comes and talks about updates to the handbook or different things she recommends, we'll make sure that she tells us what kind of feedback she's receiving. I do know, just anecdotally, one of the other things that they're working on in the office, you can imagine that they get a lot of questions from staff just about anything, but trying to keep track of their themes in the questions or specific things that people ask for, so that if it's not in the handbook, in the second version of it next year before you approve it, that they can try to incorporate that, to again, just kind of be proactive with that.
So would the second version include more procedural kinds of things or more policy kinds of things? So what I mean by that is, you know, is it clear across the district what the procedure would be, say, for, I don't even know, if you needed to take a day off, or you need to leave the building early, or, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that, you know, like, so,
Yeah.
let me give you an example. So if I was going to leave the building early, I would have to fill out a form and notify the principal that I was leaving. Is there some place that outlines all of these procedures for people? Because that isn't in the handbook, correct?
That may not be in the handbook. Each individual school has, you can almost think of like the safety addendum, like the district kind of has this
Right.
handbook. They may have a different addendum where they show staff or tell staff what the expectation is each year about different practices or procedures. I don't see this being a policy document in that we would link to your policies that you approve. So again, if there was a particular policy around, say, non-affiliated personnel or something, if they're reading through this manual, it might link you to your policy
Right.
on the website, but it wouldn't be like new policies coming in. That would always be handled secondarily.
Okay.
It is more kind of procedure-based or form-based. But again, there are going to be nuances between even like elementary, middle, high school, how you do things. And a lot of times, that's why the individual schools kind of have their own little guideline that they share with staff.
Okay, so with regards to that, those addendums, are they consistent across, let's say, all elementary schools, both middle schools and the high school?
I honestly have never looked. If I had to wager a guess, I would say no, because I'm sure like a school safety plan, they're probably very specific to things and routines and rituals that have happened within that particular school. I do think they're specific, and there'd be continuity within the school as to how people interact or operate with each other, but I can't say with any certainty that, you know, school A is doing it exactly the same way as school B.
But with respect to things like time off, I
Yeah,
think
I
there's-
didn't mean, actually, I was not, I apologize, excuse me, Barbara. I should have qualified this, the addendum, but not necessarily related to school safety, just procedural.
I use that as a.
Oh, okay, all right.
Right, but I'm just saying that, no, I mean, one school might say, you know, if you need to leave early during the day, you need to see the principal. That might be the way that they do it. Another school might say you need to see someone in the administrative office, maybe it's a principal or assistant principal, because now, say, at the middle school level, we've always had the two. At the elementary level, in the past, we only had a principal. Now we have the shared person. I'm assuming, you know, you want to have the one person in the building know. So there are going to be some nuances that have to be worked out. But I think when Cheryl does her work with the schools, obviously, we're trying to be as consistent as we can. But I still don't know. You're going to have a document, if it has 7 different ways of doing something in one document, be more confusing to staff than not. So this is kind of your overarching
Yes.
kind of procedures for the district.
You have something, Barbara?
No, I would like to see some standardization, though. You know, I think that it's important that our staff at the elementary level, that taking time off is, that procedure should be consistent, so that if a teacher wants to move to another building, the time off, that's such a standard thing. That should be the same at every building. Time off for a doctor's appointment, time off because their kid
You
got
have to leave
sick.
early.
You had to leave early,
process,
you had to
you have
take
to
off
leave
because your
early.
kid's sick.
You sign out, you tell somebody in the office, like you tell the
Right, but I
principal
want
or
it,
the
I want the procedure written and standardized across the district. I think those kind of things are important.
Yeah, and the only reason I bring that up is because, you know, I think just about everybody now is on some type of evaluation system, right?
Mhm.
And so to make sure that we're accurately and equitably evaluating people, I think that we have to make sure that the procedures are available to everyone and that they understand what they are, so that they can meet the expectations or receive feedback if they're not meeting the expectations.
Yep.
So that was, I think this is when we first started talking about the employee handbook, which I think is phenomenal, and Cheryl did a ton of work on this. very clear from the presentation that we had before. I think the one piece that I kind of felt was missing was this more procedural piece.
Yeah.
So that, as I said, everyone was clear on what the expectations were. Because, you have people that are coming in that are, maybe here just a couple of years, and you have people that are here for years and years and years, and the expectations may have changed over time, as, new staff have been hired, or new administrators have been hired, and I was just trying to find some way that we could, like I said, make sure that everybody had the same message throughout the district.
I think when you talk about the standardization, it's difficult. So, for example, at the elementary level, it's a small building, you can tell the principal, now assistant principal, or designee, because it's small. At the high school, it would have to be the dean, like, you couldn't say it has to be the principal,
Yeah.
the assistant principal, or, because they might have to go to the dean and the house secretary because of the size of the building.
Understood.
Yeah,
So it's hard to put, like, let's do this.
But I'm thinking about
No,
a
no.
situation.
Has their own
yes, I
procedure.
completely agree.
Okay.
I
At,
understand, yeah.
at different
Yeah.
grade levels.
Yes.
But I'm thinking of a teacher who transferred from Harrington, 4th grade, to South Row a few years ago. I don't want the rules to be different. I want the elementary rules to be a standard. There should be a procedure that is standardized, so that the transition shouldn't have to be that
It's
difficult.
usually only if they have to leave the building. Like, if you have a doctor's appointment, you'd be taking a half day.
That's
That would
just
be
one,
in our
yeah, that was
ASOP
just one
system. It was just
example.
more of like, if you had to, like, leave the building, I don't know, there was a quick emergency, right, or something like that.
Yes,
You could be
yes.
back in 10 minutes, right? You
Right.
could do it in 10 minutes. I don't know what I'm saying, 10 minutes, but that would be a sign in and sign out thing.
Right, and I agree with you. I think that, at each of the levels, it's going to be different because of the structure of the schools and, and the size and, but I just, I think what I've been getting at all along is that if at each level, there was some, procedural information for staff so that they knew what the
I-
expectations were.
I guess my concern would
Yeah.
be, if it were not clear within a specific building that I work in,
Yeah.
then I would want to know exactly what the procedures are.
Yes,
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
yes.
But there is a difference, there's a difference in culture and feel of every building you go into. So just because I go from building A to building B, I don't assume necessarily, I can just assume, well, what happened or was acceptable in A is gonna be acceptable in B. I mean, within the same guidelines. But I would expect Principal B, or whoever the administrative person is, to say, here's your addendum, here's your handbook for how we operate these things here, because things can be different with the staffing that we have in the schools or whatnot. Again, I think the staff handbook was meant to be your overarching, kind of procedures in general, but you could end up blowing it out so much that your 200-page book goes to be 600 pages, and you can't account for every single thing that someone could ask a question for, you could want to standardize. I guess I would go back to my first concern being, are people in the building that they're working aware of what the expectations for them are?
Right.
Right, and that I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah.
If that's not the case, that's a different issue
Right.
than trying to have all 4 of our elementary schools do everything exactly the same, because they're a little bit different. And, again, you have different schools, you have different staffs, you have different cultures within the building with regard to how they deal with things. But I see it being a working document, and obviously there are different things. Let's see what actually gets brought to HR's attention as far as the requests or these common themes that come up, and maybe, some of them can be kind of tackled each year. But I think there's always going to be work to do. We're not going to be able to guess of every single procedure that it's just, that's not going to happen.
I mean, I would be satisfied for right now is if I was absolutely sure that each staff person in these buildings had access to these addendums that you're referring
Right.
to. I don't know if they're online for them or.
It's on the intranet. I mean, through this handbook,
Right.
like, it will be hyperlinked, but we have like what's called an intranet by each school, and
Okay.
the teachers can pull that document off.
Okay.
And there's hard copies depending on, the school, if they need to fill something out.
So any employee can go to this.
Intranet.
I would be very
Intro,
surprised, and
right.
if you knew otherwise, I'd want you to tell me if a staff member within a school didn't know what policies and procedures within that school that they were supposed to be following. Because the ones that I've seen have signed off on, some type of a, acknowledgement that these are the kind of the rules we're working under
Well,
in the buildings.
and again, remember, I think it was just, I'm just making sure that we are doing our due diligence in terms of making sure this information is provided to
Right.
everyone equitably, because we have added that other layer of evaluation for paraprofessionals and
Right.
things like that. So, I want to make sure that, if they're getting feedback, that they also have they have an understanding of what the evaluative, criteria might be. And I would imagine some of it would be in that addendum.
It could be.
Yeah.
Right. And again, if they didn't have that, I would want to know.
Right.
Because the instances that, and what I see, is generally within a building.
Sure.
People understand what the rules and regulations are.
Speaking of sign-off, is there any sort of sign-off that employees have or an acknowledgement regarding the handbook that says, basically, I know that the handbook and that all the expectations for, my behavior and how I perceive of things are there?
I can go back and ask Cheryl exactly what like a new employee packet consists of, because when new employees come to the district, they sign off on acceptance of like certain policies and protocols and things like that. When this new electronic handbook was put together for the first time, no, like new people coming in, I believe, have to sign off that they've acknowledged the receipt of forms and things like this, but we did not go back to existing staff within the district and make them sign off saying that they know it's there or are aware of it.
It might not be a bad thing, because then people can't say, I didn't know.
Right.
You can say, look, you signed this paper that said, you acknowledge that there's this handbook,
Right.
and in the handbook are all the expectations. Because I know I have to sign off every year,
Right.
and the handbook doesn't change.
Well, every staff member in the district, they do go through what we call the sign-offs. There were like 13 or 14 different, like, specific, and that's all happening now. So, I mean, like, we give them the opportunity over the first about a month and a half of school to, on their own, go and do that. They then log it into a spreadsheet so that we can verify that everyone has that done. If you want, I can actually, and I can have Cheryl actually put together a little report on that for you.
Yeah.
To just show you what they actually do sign off on. But I'm just saying that giant book that's now electronic, I do not believe we had existing staff go back and sign off and say that they've received that.
I would agree with Dennis, so it may not be a bad idea.
Just add it to the list of sign-offs.
Yeah, just to acknowledge that, that you've gone through it and you're aware of what
Mm-hmm.
everything is.
Especially for the veterans, because the veterans might never had a handbook, so now all of a sudden there's a handbook, and, now they say, okay, now
I'll ask her what her plan was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
I just have the answer to your question. Yes, that South Row Para was for the therapeutic program.
Okay, thank you.
Last for me this evening, just two field trips. Group from Chelmsford High School would like to attend the Model United Nations program at Brown University, November 9th through 11th. And then McCarthy Middle School, 8th grade, World History Group going to New York City, May 30th and 31st.
So like one or two motions.
Two, or you can do one.
Okay, I move that we approve the Chelmsford High School International Relations Club participation in the Model United Nations at Brown University from November 9th to the 11th, and the McCarthy Middle School 8th grade World History trip to New York City, May 30th and 31st.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, any liaison reports?
Just quickly, I went to the BSA meeting last week for BIAM. It's always a good meeting. A lot of good parents, a lot of good updates, a lot of questions on Alice, which I wasn't really unexpected, but it was a good conversation about it. And this Saturday, October 20th, is the Boo Bash, which is a huge event every year for the BIAM school. And my kids will be there, and I'll be there, squeezed in with all the hundreds of people that show up. It's a super fun event, though.
You should check out the South Row Pumpkin Fair
Yeah.
before you hit the
Yeah.
Flying Blue Bash.
I think the BIAM Boo Bash will outdraw.
Oh, here we go.
Uh-oh, here we go. Little territory.
What are you bashing at Byam?
I attempted to go to the Harrington PTO meeting last week on that night that it was a blustery storm. It was pouring rain. And I got in my car and got completely soaking wet, and I thought, I'll check my messages before I go. And there was the message that the meeting was canceled. So it was a relief and rescheduled for next week.
Anybody else? All right, any new items people would?
I have a couple.
Okay.
One is the calendar. We were supposed to have a committee in place by October 1st to discuss that. I was wondering if we had any information on it.
Not yet, no. We plan to do that this fall.
Okay. And the second one, I was contacted by a couple teachers wanting to know where their salary statements are. It's Article 9 in their contract. That was another October 1st deadline.
Yeah, I saw a giant stack of them. I do believe they went out.
Okay.
I believe they're emailed out to people at this
Yeah,
point.
I think so
instead
too.
of printed.
They said it was October 1st, they normally got it,
Yeah.
and that was the contract, and they didn't get it. Perfect.
Okay, I'll follow up on both.
Anybody else? Any update on center school paraprofessionals for the kindergartens? We hired,
Yeah,
are we
we
in
actually,
place?
no, we did. They had some very good, and Linda, you can jump in if you want to. They had a very good applicant pool for those positions. We ended up hiring 2 paraprofessionals to help out in the morning, and then 2 to come in the afternoon. I believe they all started last week. Joanna, do you know?
It's, no, I don't know, it's close.
Okay.
They're-
I know
they're
they were, all
starting.
4 were at least hired.
Yes.
And then, if they have not already started, are starting. But Diana and I know the kindergarten group over there were very impressed with the credentials, and we're excited to get them going. So we've secured 4 people who are gonna be, if they have not already started, starting soon.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was good.
All right, anything else? Entertain a motion to,
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.